with the national anthems of the United States of America, the Ukrainian national anthem. I ask you to please stand. I call forward Commander, Ukrainian American Veterans Post 32, Major Peter Benzak.
Color guards, advance colors. Look. Detail. Right, fix. Okay, forward. March. You may take your seats.
Thank you, Ukrainian American Veterans Post 32. And now we'll have the opportunity to listen to the wonderful Ukrainian American Youth Association choir named after Nicole Alushka, based here in Chicago. Association Choir. So, При ощущении владыкос всечесніші отці, достойні, високоповажні пані і панове. З огляду тим, що більша половина, може не ціла половина, але ми маємо між собою багато американських гостей, то більша половина нашої програми буде проведена в англійській мові. A little later in the program. But now I ask our Bishop Benedict to please come forward with prayer.
В ім'я Отця і Сина і Святого Духа. Амінь. Let's go pray our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop. And now I call upon the President of the Ukrainian Congress Committee, America, Illinois Division, Dan Ihor-Chechuk.
Thank you, Father. Most Reverend Bishop Benedict, Reverend Fathers, the Honorable Consul General of Ukraine in Chicago, Mr. Kolydov, members of the Consular Court, the Honorable Senator of the great state of Illinois, Richard Durbin, the Honorable Congressman, well, some of them are not in attendance yet, but they will be, Davis, Quigley, and Krishnamurti, members of the Ukrainian American Veterans Post 32, Her Honor, the Mayor of Chicago, Ms. Lori Lightfoot, representatives of the innumerable ethnic communities and friends of Ukraine, the Ukrainian community of Chicago, welcome, vitayu. There are a number of significant historical dates that are forged into the Ukrainian conscience. 988, Knyaz Volodymyr accepts Christianity on behalf of Kievan Rus and the Ukrainian people. January 22nd, 1919, the establishment of the unified Ukrainian National Republic. 1932 and 1933, death by starvation, known as Holodomor, in which 10 million Ukrainians, including 3.5 million children, lost their lives. August 24th, 1991, the proclamation of Ukrainian independence and the recognition of Ukraine as a free, independent, and sovereign country. November, December of 2004, the Orange Revolution. February 2014, the Revolution of Dignity, and the beginning of the Russian incursion into Ukraine. And of course, February 24th, 2022, the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Throughout our history, the Ukrainian people have persevered, and no Tsar, nor Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, or Putin were able to destroy the language, culture, traditions, or national identity of the Ukrainian people. Today, we gather to commemorate and honor Unity Day, or День Злуки. But our thoughts, undoubtedly, are with our brave soldiers, volunteer battalions, humanitarian volunteers, and the over 8 million refugees who had to flee their homeland, and most tragically, the untold tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of innocent civilians and members of the armed forces of Ukraine who have lost their lives, killed by the savages Putin unleashed on our motherland. On behalf of the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, the Illinois Division, I extend my sincerest thanks to all of you who are here today to honor this most important day in our history and show our unity and purpose in defeating the terrorist state, Russia. Every day, we inch closer to victory, and with the help of our partners, led by the United States and the 50 countries who value democracy and liberty, we will overcome our century-old foe, and Ukraine will take its rightful place in Europe and forever be a symbol of victory over tyranny and darkness. God bless the United States of America. God bless Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to our heroes. Слава Україні! Героям слава! До перемоги!
I now call upon the Consul General of Ukraine, Mr. Serhiy Polidov.
Шановна українська громада, honorable guests, dear friends of Ukraine. It is a great honor to be here today, and I have a privilege to congratulate you on behalf of Ambassador Oksana Markarova and to reach letter signed and communication of holiday. January 22nd, 2023, Embassy of Ukraine, Washington, D.C., to the esteemed Ukrainian community of Chikاґо. Dear members of the Ukrainian Congress Committee Evenly Division, I greet you on one of the most important days of our history, the day of Ukrainian unification and independence. The act of the unification of the Ukrainian National Republic and the Western Ukrainian National Republic of January 22nd, 1990, was the highest declaration of the patriotism of the Ukrainian nation for the establishment of independent Ukraine and the unity of the Ukrainian nation. 104 years ago, the Ukrainian nation freed itself from foreign slavery and took an important step toward unity in the country with a single national and human set of values, united to provide a secure, worthy life of dignity. Today, during the difficult struggle to defend independence from the Russian horde, this cruel and unjustified aggression only strengthened the act of unity of 1919. Our enemy again wants to fragment and divide our state for forcefully grabbing our land and establishing artificial borders and gray zones. We remember and honor those heroes who desperately fought for our freedom in the past and who defend it today on the fields of bloody battles. We are grateful to the powerful allies of Ukraine who support us in every way and believe in the bright future of Ukraine as a democratic, independent nation and a whole member of the European Union and NATO. Ukraine will win because we learned bitter lessons from our history. Our strength in our unity, and in division there is defeat. We are united and we will win. I wish you a good health, harmony, new achievements for the glory of our motherland, and a quick victory in the, hopefully, the last war for freedom, territorial integrity, and the national sovereignty of our country. Слава Україні! Героям слава! Ambassador Oksana Markarova. Dear friends, Dear friends, the act of unification is a truly significant event in the history of statehood of Ukraine, which provides two important guidelines for all future generations. First, if the struggle is not stopped sooner or later, the united and independent state will be fully restored. Second, if the true unity is not achieved, independence will be lost. Remembering the first guideline, generation of freedom fighters of Ukraine did not give up until 1991 to restore the independence of our state. And the task of our and all future generations is to remember the second guidelines to preserve this independence. More than 100 years ago, the Act Zluky was proclaimed. The part of united Ukraine, separated from each other for centuries, was reunited. Today, parts of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk regions, and Autonomous Republic of Crimea, unfortunately, temporarily occupied by Russia. But I know we will definitely be together, and I'm sure not after the centuries, but as soon as possible. We will definitely proclaim a new act of unification and celebrate it every year. There are traditions that should definitely emerge in the future. To be strong, one must become united. To become united, one must be strong. Happy Day of Unity of Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
The unification of Eastern and Western Ukraine into one great nation on January 22nd, 1919. 104 years later, Ukraine is still defending itself against the Russian aggressors. But this time, Ukraine is American and Western allies who are coming to her assistance. We want to thank the United States of America, our senators and congressmen, especially those who are here with us today, and the American citizens who have stood with Ukraine since the brutal, illegal invasion by Russia, and many others that have been strong supporters for many years prior to that. 2 days ago, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was here in this building for a historic visit to the Ukrainian village of Chikagło. He met with representatives of the Ukrainian community to discuss a wide range of topics, and he was accompanied by our esteemed Senator Dick Durbin. And we are sure that Senator Durbin will share some of those items that were discussed during that particular point. But I do want to share something with you. Secretary Blinken was very interested in hearing about how the Chikagło Hromada, how our community responded to the brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. He heard about the millions and millions of dollars of support that went for humanitarian assistance, that went for tactical assistance, that went for medical equipment and the like, that we were basically grassroots funding. And he was particularly interested in our infrastructure, our community organizations, our churches, in respect to how are we going to be able to handle an influx of another 40,000 war refugees to Chikagło. And I think we properly demonstrated to him, we have the resources, we have the infrastructure. We need a little more funding. We could always ask for more funding, but certainly we're well positioned to be able to do this in the most effective way. I'm the son of a Holodomor genocide survivor. My mother was a 10-year-old child when her brothers and sisters were deliberately starved to death by the Kremlin regime. Today, 90 years later, we see another Kremlin-engineered genocide with Moscow bombing apartment buildings, shopping centers, railroad stations, maternity wards, hospitals, the energy infrastructure in order to freeze the Ukrainians to death. President Biden, back in April, stated that what is happening in Ukraine is genocide. Because what Russia is doing in Ukraine is a blatant attempt to eradicate Ukraine as a nation. Putin's goal was, of course, to restore the Soviet Union, and we've heard this many, many times. He wants to destroy Western alliances and plunge the world into chaos so Russia can dominate. Ukraine will never go back to the Soviet Union. The Ukrainian people will not abandon their Western aspirations to live like normal people. Ukrainians categorically reject world chaos, and Russian world domination is rejected out of hand. Ukrainians will continue to resist, but this time Ukraine needs continued support from the United States and, of course, our Western allies. Ukrainians understand they're in an existential fight for their lives and freedom, and also the freedom for the transatlantic community. They are fighting a war for Western Europe. They're fighting a war for our American and Canadian sovereignty as well on this side of the Atlantic. The U.S. should set the agenda to put an end to this gross violation of human norms, and we believe our allies will follow us. When America is strong, our allies unite with us, and they definitely will work with us through the end here. All we ask for at this time is to stop the genocide in Ukraine. And as you saw in this very emotive video just before that, it's beyond tragic. We thank our representatives in Congress, and again, all of our friends and neighbors that have supported and continue to support us. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini. And now I am pleased and honored to introduce our esteemed Senator Dick Durbin, who is greatly respected and greatly admired by the Ukrainian community for your strong advocacy on U.S.-Ukrainian bilateral relations and your strong support for Ukraine's defense. Senator Durbin is not only co-chair of the Senate Ukraine Caucus, but he is also a co-founder. When at a banquet not unlike this one, he heard our request and he acted upon it and formed the Senate Ukraine Caucus, and as a result, there's a very strong coalition of our senators that are very well informed. Please, ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome for the senator.
It is an honor to be back here today. Recently, President Zelensky spoke to a joint session of Congress. We had a welcoming line of senators who waited their turn to get a picture with him, because he's no longer a stand-up comedian. He's a stand-up leader in the history of the world. And we couldn't wait for the opportunity to greet him personally. And when I went up to him to shake his hand, I said, "I'm the United States Senator from the Ukrainian village in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois." A big smile came to his face. He knows who we are. He knows who you are. And he knows that the beating heart of the Ukrainian American community is here in Chicago. And you should take pride in your faith. Your religion, your culture, your music, your language, all of these things come together in Ukrainian village. And the good thing about Chicago is it's a welcoming city for many different people, not just from Ukraine. To look back on my own family history, my mother was born in Lithuania, and at the age of 2, she was brought to the United States as a little girl. She didn't come to Chicago. She came to a city, East St. Louis, Illinois, where there were quite a few Lithuanians, and grew up in that community. She never was able to make it back to Lithuania, but I was. When I was elected to the United States House of Representatives, I made my first visit to my mother's home country of Lithuania. And you may remember, 30 years ago, Lithuania, like so many other former Soviet republics, were going through what Ukraine went through, the emergence of their own independence and freedom, their own national identity. It was a remarkable time when all across that part of Eastern Europe and other parts of our nation, parts of our world, countries were making decisions. They were willing to risk everything to be independent in their future. Ukraine went through that, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, so many others. And they broke away from the Soviet Union, not without a cost. Gorbachev was a leader in Russia in those days. He sent his tanks into Vilnius, Lithuania. They killed 14 people at the television tower. Innocent people standing up as freedom fighters, asking for independence. The same thing, of course, happened in Ukraine and so many other countries. Less than 3 million people in Lithuania, they were still determined to be free. And those days finally arrived. The good news is they arrived in many places. And many countries emerged finally as independent. And these countries have bonded together in this hall, in this building, in this community, and in this world against the aggression of the Russians under Vladimir Putin. Make no mistake, what you saw in that video earlier is accurate. It tells the story of Putin, the thug, Putin, the war criminal, Putin, the man who is imposing genocide on the innocent people of Ukraine. Just a few years ago, I joined with the late Senator John McCain and went to the Maidan. John McCain was a hero in Ukraine and should have been. He stood up for the Ukrainian people when others would not. And we took this tour of the area around Maidan. We stopped several times at sites where innocent people were shot down by snipers of the Russian-loving government of Ukraine in those days. Well, the new Ukraine emerged, and that new Ukraine is now fighting for its life. I think back in my own history, my own family, and I think of the history of the United States of America. I recently reread a book called The Greatest Generation by Tom Brokaw, who told the story of Americans who answered the call in World War II to go to Europe and fight for the values of America. It was a glorious time in our history. Lives were lost, but they were the lives of heroes, and we honor them even to this day. We face the same thing in this situation. The Russians have invaded Ukraine. They are not only killing the people and displacing them, the children, the mothers, the families, but they are also trying to kill the dream of Ukraine's freedom and independence. We cannot in America allow that to happen. I want to salute leaders in both political parties who have stood up for Ukraine and been willing to vote as I have for the resources so that they can wage this battle. I will tell you something, and this is right in public. Congressman Krishnamurthy has joined us here. I'm sure he'll have a few words to say. He will probably also recount to you the experience we had when this war started in Ukraine. We were told, Colonel Bettman, by many of the intelligence experts that Kyiv would fall to the Russians in very short order, a matter of days. It didn't happen. We know it didn't happen because of the courage and determination of the Ukrainian people. And I believe that was instructive. Great cost to think of the displacement of all these people. And I also have to say a word to my Polish friends who are present. You have done a remarkable thing. Other countries have joined you in accepting the refugees from this war. It was at one of these meetings early on that I attended that one of the consul generals from Poland said, yes, we extended a helping hand to the Ukrainians because when we needed a helping hand, no one was there. They remembered history, and we all should. Never forget the lessons of history. And the lessons of history tell us that if we stand up to aggression now, it not only will save Ukraine and give it its path to independence and freedom again, but it will save countries all around the world from dictators and autocratic leaders like Vladimir Putin, who are willing to kill innocent people hour after hour, day after day, to break their will. Now, I want to say one word about something going on in Washington. There is a new leadership in the U.S. House of Representatives. It is untested. 15 ballots later, we have a new Speaker of the House. We don't know what the House of Representatives under this new leadership is going to do. I believe, and I hope I'm right, that there is still strong bipartisan support for Ukraine. I know there is in the Senate. I hope that continues in the House. And I want to tell you, those who question whether we should continue to support the brave people of Ukraine, I'd like to park them in a chair and have them watch that video about the genocide. They would know better when it's over. What's at stake here is not just Ukrainian leadership. What's at stake is the values we share as Americans and values we're willing to help people fight for around the world. I'm honored to be with you today. As co-chair of the Senate Ukrainian Caucus, I promise you this. As long as I have the honor to represent you, you will have a strong voice for the people of Ukraine and for freedom for the world. Slava Ukraini.
I now call upon one of our most enthusiastic representatives in the House of Representatives, Congressman from the Northwest area outside of Chikaago, the 7th Congressional District, our very, very good friend who was so enthusiastic a year ago, he wound up getting sanctioned and banned from traveling to Russia. So please warm welcome for Russia Krishnamurti.
Slava Ukraini! I am honored to be here. As I like to say, I'm honored to be any place they can pronounce my name right. It's a true story. I've told Senator Durbin this before, but when I first ran for office, I said, "Hi, my name is Raja Krishnamurti." And the person said, "Raja Krishnamurti, where did you get that funny name and what does it mean?" So I said, it's very simple. Translated from an ancient language, it means Congressman for the 8th District of Illinois. So, as somebody familiar with your heritage and your beautiful names, I'm so honored to be here. And thank you so much for having me. I want to observe those 3 rules of public speaking. Be short, be sweet, and be gone. 3 points. First of all, can you give a big round of applause to our dignitaries? Senator Durbin. I see elected officials like Fritz Cagey. I see others. And of course, I see Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. Give them all a big round of applause. It's a big deal that they're here. It's a big deal that they're here. And Senator Durbin and I have been banned by Russia from visiting. And so we both had to break the bad news to our wives that we're not going to be able to vacation in Siberia this year. So we're going to do our own trip somewhere else. So thank you. I want to say a word about Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. That's my second point. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, I had the honor of being able to question you during Donald Trump's first impeachment proceedings. And I don't know if you recall, but I recall that day vividly. Your honesty, your patriotism, and your courage were on display for all of America to see. And as I said to you then, I'll say it to you now. You represent the very best of America. Third and final point is this. It's a little more serious. 1 year ago, when Senator Durbin and I were here along with others, we were here predicting that Ukraine would be strong in the face of Russian aggression. 1 year ago, we stated our unwavering support for the Ukrainians. 1 year later, today, we know our predictions came true. Not only have the Ukrainians been strong against the Russians, they are prevailing on the battlefield. One year later, not only did Senator Durbin and I and many others in Congress state our words in support of Ukraine, we voted for over $60 billion in armaments and aid for Ukraine, and more is on the way. last year, apparently RTV took notice of me, the Russian television broadcasting system. And they said I was the, quote, Indian congressman supporting Ukraine. Although they were not correct about which constituency I represent, they can be assured that I support Ukraine and I am a Ukrainian supporter of Ukraine. We are all Ukrainians today. We are all Ukrainians today. I see my good friend Congressman Danny Davis has joined us as well, the dean of our delegation. And I aspire to be on the dean's list. Look, folks, we have a tough battle right ahead for us in Ukraine. There's no doubt about it. But we know this, as a great leader once said, success is not final, failure is not fatal, but the courage to continue is what counts. And what the Ukrainians are doing today, day after day, and continuing with their struggle against tyranny, is something we will always support. Because, let's be honest, Ukrainians are fighting a war so that we don't have to. They are fighting for freedom, liberty, and all the values that we cherish and that we think of as Americans to be our birthright. Well, guess what? It should be their birthright too, and we are going to stand with them to victory. And I can't wait to come back in 1 year and repeat that to you. We predicted victory, and victory was ours. I close with my favorite saying. Yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery, but today's a gift. That's why we call it the present. I'm so honored and blessed to be with you here for just a few short minutes of your precious time to celebrate you, to celebrate your families, to celebrate Ukrainian Americans, and to celebrate Ukraine. Slava Ukraini! God bless Ukraine! God bless America! Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I have the distinct honor of inviting the Dean of the Congressional Delegation in the state of Illinois, our very own Danny K. Davis, who's been to so many of our things. We all know him by sight. Congressman Davis, please.
Thank you very much, and God bless Roger Christamore. Let me just say how delighted I am to be here and to once again have the opportunity to share in this important luncheon. It has been my good fortune to travel to Ukraine and to see the country and to know the country. To know the influence and the impact, and know Western Europe, and know that Ukrainians are the vanguard for democracy, for independence, and for freedom, not just for its own country, but for all of Western Europe, especially, and for all of those of us throughout the world who have the notion that freedom is important, that liberation is important. And so I am pleased to be here with you. I knew that when I got here, I'd probably see my good friend, the top United States Senator in the United States of America, the Honorable Richard Durbin, who is number 2 in leadership for all the Democrats in the Senate. And I can tell you that if it was not for the United States Senate right now, this country would be in one real mess. Because they stand between us and what those colleagues of ours would do in the House. But fortunately, we have a Senate. And we have a Senate that Senator Durbin, who went there the same year that I went to Congress. And I often remember Paul Simon, Senator Paul Simon. I was a great fan of Paul Simon. I drove to Carbondale to his funeral in the snow. Me and a fellow named Nate Benson, a friend of mine. But I remember when I decided to run, I asked Senator Simon if he would endorse me. And he said, I generally try to stay out of primaries. He said, but I'm going to make two exceptions. One, he says, I'm going to endorse my protege, the guy that's been with me and I consider him like a son, Dick Durbin, who's running for my seat, Senator Simon is leaving. And then he said, I'm going to make an exception in the House races, and I'm going to endorse you. And so I've always felt an affinity for Senator Durbin because Paul Simon mentioned my name at the same time he mentioned his. So Senator, it's always good to be with you. Let me just reaffirm what Representative Marty has already said. We just left the leader of the Democratic House. And somebody asked Hakeem Jeffries a question relative to our support of Ukraine and whether or not that support would continue. And I must confess that there are folks on the other side. I heard a lady ask the question, who's that over there? Is that the man? You know, you don't look both ways. You don't know where you are. And you don't see what you see. Your Honor, it is so good to see you here this afternoon. It's a real pleasure. And I appreciate the work that you're doing on behalf of all of us in the city of Chicago. And so I take great pride in what you have done and what you continue to do. That so goes Ukraine, so goes freedom throughout the world. And that if we cave in, if we give in, let me say, I just love the president. I just love the Ukrainian leader. The guy who don't wear suits and ties, don't have any airs, not overly impressed with himself in terms of who he is. I'm an acting guy who understands all of what you need to understand if you're going to represent people. He's of the people, for the people, by the people, and he lets that be known every time he gets the opportunity to make a public presentation. And so I just love him to death. Coming up, he's risen to the top of leadership in this country. That's what America really is. America is filled with diversity, and I can't let that escape me. I see Roger, sometimes I call him Christian Morty, because people be trying to pronounce his name correctly, and he tells them what it is. But to know that all of our heritages are a part of what makes up our city, what makes up our country, and what makes up our world. So I pledge to continue my support. Yes, we have to provide the resources that are needed. We must undergird and help strengthen Ukraine and Ukrainians. And I just love the resistance that the Ukrainian people have demonstrated. I end with a poem Guy wrote, and I just love it sometimes when you're pressed up against the wall. He said that if we must die, let it not be like hogs hunted and pinned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mark at our cursed life. He says, if we must, let us nobly die, so that even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us though dead. O kinsmen, brothers and sisters, let us show our brave. Let us meet the common foe, and for their 1,000 foes deal one death blow. For what before us lies, the open grave, like the true fighters for liberation that we are, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but always, always fighting back. God bless you, and God keep you. God bless Ukraine, and God bless the United States of America.
Dean of the Illinois Congressional Delegation, Congressman Danny Davis, has been an unwavering supporter of Ukraine and the Congress, and we're so blessed and so pleased. They are always there for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I now have the honor of introducing to you the mayor of the city of Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'd like to begin with asking you to give a moment of silence for the people of Ukraine who are suffering, who are victimized on a daily basis by Putin's murderous attack on civilians. I don't know how we watch a video, read the daily news without feeling that in our hearts and souls. And I think we are called upon in this moment to never forget the victims who are suffering, our elders, the young ones. This is a terrible time, but the Ukrainian people are showing us the way in which we must love freedom, fight for it every single day. But a moment of silence for the victims. Thank you. I am honored to be here to commemorate 1919 Ukrainian people's public unification and the Declaration of Independence from Moscow. That declaration must ring through the centuries and the decades to this moment so that we never forget it and we never lose the resolve to fight back against those who want to take freedom from the people of Ukraine. Of course, this commemoration is bittersweet. For once again, the Ukrainian people are fighting for their lives, fighting for what we take for granted, and that is to live as free, self-determined, independent people. At this time last year, Russia was beginning to make its move, building up their forces along the border, and it was all too clear what they were planning to do. But since that time, Chikagło, you here in this room, and people in this community have stood strong in solidarity with Ukrainian people here and abroad. And when the war broke out, we supported local donation efforts, engaged with Ukrainian leadership, and called upon the Biden-Harris administration to support Ukraine and the people in every way possible. And we must never never waver in our resolve. Additionally, in City Hall's lobby, I want you to know, we are currently displaying a memorial for some of Ukraine's kidnapped and murdered mayors as a demonstration of our solidarity. I invite you to come, and we will never, ever put that down until Ukraine is free once again. You know this because you see it every day, and you are feeling it, and you are hearing from your relatives that the fight for freedom in Ukraine has reached a new pitch as the war criminal, Putin, tries to weaponize winter against the Ukrainian people and trying to destroy the will of the civilians who have held firm and remain in the cities and in the rural areas. The country faces electricity and water shortages. Ukrainians must know that we here in the United States and across the world stand with them in concrete, tangible ways. Thoughts and prayers, ladies and gentlemen, are not enough. We must demonstrate our resolve in concrete, tangible ways that help the people of Ukraine, whether they're here, whether they're there, or whether they're in countries across Europe. We must show our resolve by our deeds. The Honorable Bishop Benedict and I were able to share a word before this program began. And he said to me, and I'm paraphrasing Bishop, so give me some liberties, that the United States must remain steadfast and in support of Ukraine. And he is right. The United States must forcefully reject any pressure to ever give in to Ukraine, to Putin. And frankly, the next time we see him should be in The Hague at his trial as a war criminal. And we must remain committed to supporting Ukraine, not only through the end of the war, but as the country rebuilds after this disastrous war. And when they will inevitably emerge as victorious. I am committed to making sure that Chikagå takes a firm role in rebuilding the country of Ukraine. We've already started those conversations with members of the administration, and we will be there on the front lines, making sure that we do our part to make sure that Ukraine is strong and united and better than ever after this war. In the meantime, we continue to welcome Ukrainians who will come to our city of Chikagå for safety and protection. And I want to thank the schools that have stood up and welcomed Ukrainian students into their fold, and also the other social services organizations that have done the Lord's work and helping these families. In the cathedral not that long ago that I had the pleasure of meeting several of those families before the holidays. And one mother's words really stood out to me. She was these families were part of Christmas in the Ward, which is a charitable organization here that makes sure that families, no matter what their circumstances, the children in particular, have what they need to celebrate the magic and the gift of Christ's birth and Christmas. This one family, the mother was very concerned about making sure that her children had all they needed. And I said to her, and Marta was there, "What about you?" And what she said to me is something I will never forget. She said, "Well, I could use a coat because this one I borrowed from my sister." We must make sure that we live our values as a welcoming city, that people who come here, no matter where they are, their country of origin, and particularly folks who are fleeing the bloodshed in Ukraine, that we support them in every material way possible, and we will continue to do that. Now, I know that Secretary Blinken was recently here on Friday, where he met with many of you. And I hope, and I've heard, that, and I commend you for those who are gathered, sharing your candor and your experience and your concerns, but importantly, your resolve. Leaders in Washington need to know that we are here, that we are experiencing the pain and the suffering, but also the hope that a better day will come on the horizon. So I want to thank all of you who shared those moments with us. Let me also thank the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America Illinois Division. You all have stood strong from day one. When you saw the storm clouds gathering, you never, ever wavered, and you united us and pricked our consciousness to do what was necessary for us to stand strong. References have been made to President Zelensky, and as you saw from his speech to Congress, he called upon our history in coming to support of those just like the Ukrainian people today. God-fearing, patriotic, people who just want to live in freedom. Now, the truth is, we haven't always been there when we needed it. But this is a time where we cannot waver. Senator, Congresspeople, you know the storm clouds are there, and it is uncertain what will be happening, particularly with this new leadership in the House. But we can never waver. We can never turn our backs. We must answer the call that President Zelensky gave us, and we must send those tanks and the weapon systems that are necessary to help support. Let me also say to the Council Generals who are here, you all have stood strong in this moment. But please, make sure you take back to your home countries and capitals the resolve of the people of Chikاဃo, the resolve of the people who are here fighting hard every single day. We need Europe to remain strong and united in support of the defense of Ukraine. Yes, the United States must absolutely assume its rightful role in a moral leadership of the world. That is resolute. But we need our partners and our allies in Europe to do the same and follow suit. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to be a chorus in every way that we can do to make sure that we don't waver, that our leaders hear us, that we hold us, all of us, accountable. Because this is one of those important inflection moments in history. And as goes Ukraine, so too will go the European continent. Make no mistake about it. So we must fight back. We must stand up for freedom in all of its forms. This is our call to action. This is our duty and our obligation, and we must meet this moment strongly, resolute, and united on behalf of the people who are here, the people who are there. And folks in Europe, I've spoken to the mayors of Warsaw, I've spoken to the mayor of Berlin. If we stand strong and your country stands strong, it will help what's happening in those strong capital cities. The refugees need to go home, but they need to go home to a peaceful country and a country that is rebuilding itself. Final words from me. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, I'm not sure if you're still here in the room. There you are. The world watched you, and we watch with pride. You, sir, are a patriot in the finest of ways. Your country loves you and supports you. Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for your sacrifice. But thank you for standing strong in a moment that was hard. A moment where you were fighting against the President of the United States, but you, sir, were in the right. And we love and respect you in everything that you have done. Thank you. It's not enough to say it. We have to live it out, to live our values every single day, as you have been doing since the beginning of this fight. The fight's not over, but victory victory is on the horizon. God bless you all. God bless the great country.
As we heard earlier, Mayor Lightfoot, we're anticipating 40,000 new immigrants in the state of Illinois, and a good portion of them are going to settle in the city of Chicago. Our Self-Reliance Association has been instrumental from day zero in making sure that these war refugees have a welcoming center to go to. And they're only able to do this through a combination of public and private financial support. And I know they're very grateful for the federal assistance they receive, assistance from the state of Illinois, and certainly from our private partners, including the United Jewish Fund, which has made a generous grant, and certainly support from the city of Chicago. So when our friends at the association turn to the city, we're counting on some very strong support. Thank you again. And now I have the pleasure of introducing to you the Cook County Treasurer, or Cook County Assessor, Fritz K., who I first met about 5 years ago at this luncheon, and he's been coming back year after year after year, and we're happy to have you here with us again. Please.
Well, thank you, and thank you, United Ukrainian Congress in Illinois. Доброго дня. And glory to United Ukraine. I'm your assessor, Fritz Kagi. I'm proud to be returning with you here to celebrate Ukraine's unity and Ukraine. And I want to address myself today to our local community leaders. You know, today we're hearing from so many different supporters from Ukraine. We can feel the strength in this room. This, of course, includes our federal leaders, Senator Durbin, and our congressional delegation. They're so important to giving Ukraine the resources needed to eject Russia from Ukrainian land and to be compensated by Russia with its assets for the immense damages that it suffered at Russian hands, like we saw in Dnipro, but a million times over. But all of us have a part to play in the story. All of us, including elected officials of every stripe here in Illinois. Legislators, trustees, mayors, you know, we have aldermen here, yes, even assessors. We're all needed. Our role is to remind the public of why we all stand with Ukraine, come what may, and to provide our own locally driven reserve of support for federal leaders when times get tough, so our resolve can impel Ukraine forward to victory. You see, it's not only the brave, heroic Ukrainians who need to see our resolve. We're removing any doubts in the minds of Putin and the Chekists around him, and anyone else in Russia who might be wondering when we do this, you know, who might be wondering about, is this support going to continue? We want to help them along on the road to defeat, to withdrawal, and to damnation. Let's keep demonstrating our resolve to the allies, to our friends in Germany. I see Consul General Musinger. I see so many of our other friends here. Our strength can give them strength to tell their peoples to provide the support that Ukraine needs to secure the victory and show the path to victory. We can show the support to other allies around the world so that they can all be strong, dig deep, and provide the specific thing Ukraine needs right now to see through to victory. See, we are part of a vital support chain. The chain starts here with us in Chicago. It starts with the Chroma, and then it's our friends and neighbors in Chicago. And then this chain, it goes to Washington, and then it goes to our allies. It goes to the border in Poland, in Romania. It goes across the border to Ukraine, and then right to the front lines. And yes, it goes right to Russia's rear. So here's what we're doing as local leaders. We're reminding Americans of our community's love of Ukraine. We're spreading the word of Ukrainian people's heroism in the defense of their democracy and their very existence. Some of those stories, like we heard today from Dnipro. We're showing that their fight is our fight, that these two things are inseparable, that things will only get more costly and menacing if we foolishly allow Russia to prevail or even to get a pause. We're telling the story of what Ukraine needs to win to bring the war to a close. We're making sure we sustain and grow bipartisan federal support, come what may, and when it feels like times are tough, that is the signal that all of us leaders here in this room need to redouble our own efforts and raise our own voices, because that's when we're especially needed. So I want to salute all of you in bringing our friends and neighbors and fellow leaders, elected and community, here together in celebrating Ukraine's historic and wholly separate unity as a country and guaranteeing its eternal unity for now and forever. Браті і сестри мої, слава Україні!
Thank you very much, Fritz. And now, I have a special honor to introduce my congressman. All right? This is the fellow that represents me, my wife, our children, all of our neighbors, and is one of the strongest supporter of Ukrainian issues in Congress year after year. He comes out in a bit of cold, he comes out in the sweltering heat. We all know, highly respect, and certainly love our Congressman Mike Quigley.
Good afternoon, my friends. We have met in the best of times and the worst of times. In some respects, today is both. Because we're united here today for a special anniversary, but we know the terrors that are going on across the world. But what we learn together in the best of times keeps us strong when we persevere with what's taking place now. I was with Senator Durbin in Kyiv just before the elections. I was there right after the Maidan, and I saw the spirit. I saw the potential. And I was at the Polish border with Ukraine twice last year, and I was in Kyiv in August. So I think having you as my friends who have been good enough to teach me and help me understand what's at stake has helped me talk to the rest of the world, talk to my colleagues about why this matters. Let's remember the obvious. We simply can't have a sovereign democratic country wiped off the face of the earth. But it's also a lot about who we are as a country. The best speeches by American presidents, ironically, were the shortest. Lincoln at Gettysburg and FDR's last inaugural. Why we do this as the United States was stated so succinctly by FDR in his last inaugural address. And we understand all that he went through is much of what we are witnessing today. Right? The isolationists, those that don't want to care about a country on the other side of the world, that don't want to care, their country first, whatever it is. That's what FDR had to address. And for those who say today, we have our own problems. We have inflation, we have potential for a recession. FDR had a depression, right? He was able to speak. And he said the words that I'm trying to remind myself of. He said that Emerson taught us that to have a friend, you need to be one. and that is so true in the world, right? That he said, we have learned that our country, our democracy, our way of life is dependent on the success of democracies and those ways of life across the world. So I am honored to be with you because of what we've been through. When I was in Kyiv, at a train station where you couldn't have lights, fear of shelling, I was with our embassy, with a skeleton crew living in the embassy with the bare essentials. How can you not be united? I was at the scene of the battle at the nearby airport. And as you walk across the ground, you run across the little nails that are in the fragmentation grenades. And you appreciate why that battle mattered, why Kyiv was still standing, because of that courage. And finally, why do we fight? I was at the church in Bucha, and I asked the priest, I said, where is the mass grave that he said we're standing on? Been to many sites in our world that are testimony to the evils that come from mankind. What do we always tell ourselves? Never again. Never again. Well, without our help, without the United States, without NATO, again could have happened. Without the extraordinary courage, bravery of the Ukrainians, it could happen again. And for those who think, as you know, this is over, they're fun, this is only a matter of time. Now is not the time. Now is the time to do everything we possibly can. Now is the time to redouble our efforts. Now is the time to work with our colleagues and the doubters and to push back and remind them this isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. It's who we are as a country, it's who we should be as man and humankind. I've never been more proud to serve you as when I was there meeting with Zelensky and the brave warriors. We are all Ukrainian today, and I'm very proud to be part of that. Thank you. God bless.
In addition to our elected representatives, we have many, many community and ethnic partners that have united with us and have been strong supporters. I'd like to ask a few of their representatives to come up and share a few words with us. Shortly after February 24th, Steve and we established a dialogue. We've had a number of conversations, a number of Zoom meetings. We've met in person at their office, and this is the office of the Jewish United Fund. And Steve was a very gracious host to meet with our representatives at that time, as he is the Assistant Vice President and responsible specifically for the international and public affairs at the Jewish United Fund. And as a result of that meeting, and I'm not stealing your thunder here, Steve, but they immediately opened up the opportunity to provide some funding directly to the Self-Reliance Association. So please welcome Steve Dishler.
Good afternoon. You never want to follow one politician. You certainly don't want to have to follow 6 politicians. But here it goes. On behalf of the Jewish United Fund and the Jewish community of Chicago, it is an honor to join with you in commemorating Ukraine's Independence and Unity Day, and to express our solidarity with the people of Ukraine. For Chicago Jews, this is personal. Many of our ancestors emigrated to the U.S. from Ukraine, including an important guy in Springfield, Governor Pritzker, his family. And JOF, through our partnership committee, has held a decades-long relationship with Ukrainian people and with Kyiv. From the outset of the brutal, unjustified, barbaric attack on Ukraine by Russia, our community mobilized and to date has rushed over $8 million in emergency relief assistance to support efforts on the ground in Ukraine and in the neighboring states. And we will continue to provide assistance to agencies that are providing support for Ukrainians that are arriving to our city and to our state. And through our lobbying and through our efforts in Washington D.C., we'll continue to press our government to provide increased military aid to the people of Ukraine. So Yasher Koach on your Unity Day, and as it says in the Bible, Chazak Chazak v'yitchazik. May you go from strength to strength. We are all united together with Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate those warm greetings, and we're very honored to have you here. And now, I'll introduce someone. We probably go back at least a decade, if not more. We've had many protests against Russian aggression. Someone who's been very active in the joint Baltic environment. He's currently the president of the Lithuanian American Council, our longtime friend, Saulius Kupris.
On behalf of the Lithuanian American Council in Chicago and the Joint Baltic American National Committee in Washington, D.C., representing the Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian communities in the United States, we stand with our Ukrainian brethren, striving to safeguard democracy and your independence. Ukraine's present struggle is a universal one. Thus, let us not equivocate. Your struggle is our struggle. Your victory will be our victory. Let us thus recommit ourselves today to our common cause of freedom and to one another as brothers and sisters engaged in a noble quest. We look forward to Ukraine free of oppression and tyranny, to a nation freely celebrating its heritage and statehood built upon a foundation of human dignity and freedom. Slava Ukraina!
I now ask a dear friend of ours, Zhanya Chernaivskaya, who hails from a country that also is under an authoritarian, repressive regime, Belarus. Zhanya is with the Belarusians of Chikagło. Please come forward.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Slava Ukraini! God bless the United States. And живе вольная Беларусь. My name is Zhanya Chernaivskaya. I'm the president of the Belarusian community in Chicago, and I'm a representative of Association of Belarusian Americans and all free people, free-loving people of Belarus. I'm sending you our support. The Ukrainian nation is an inspiration for us. Your unity, your resilience, your resolve, and your strength. We are also fighting our fight and we perfectly know that Lukashenko regime facilitated the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Lukashenko is the co-aggressor of this regime. Are we supporting him? No. Probably you know that since 1996, none of the elections in Belarus were recognized as free and fair. But in 2020, the Belarusian people went united to the voting polls to vote Lukashenko out. But with the support of Putin, he was able to control Belarus. Since then, many of our people are imprisoned. Today, we have more than 1,400 internationally recognized political prisoners in Belarus. The Nobel Prize laureate, the fighter for human rights today is in prison, Ales Beliatsky, and if you were watching the Nobel Prize ceremony, his wife received his award. He's facing today 7 to 12 years in prison. For what? Just for supporting freedom in Belarus, just supporting human rights. The coordinator of the same organization, Vesna, Marfa Rabkova, who is a young girl, I'm not sure how old is she, but she is sentenced to 20 years in prison just to be coordinator of the human rights organization in Belarus. I just want to point out that Lukashenko regime is fighting against the Belarusian people. He is a supporter of Putin, but he is not only fighting against democracy and freedom, he is fighting the Belarusian identity, he's fighting our language, he's fighting our culture and our history. He is suppressing the true Belarusian history. And we are, the Belarusian people, are united with us, are united with Ukrainians. Our heart goes to us, and we gonna do as much as possible to support Ukraine. And then we're gonna fight for our country, we're gonna fight for our freedom and for democracy. We're also resolved to become a free, independent nation and friends of free, democratic world. The Ukrainian community for staying with us, and I thank the United States for staying with us and supporting our fight for freedom. And today we've seen Senator Dick Durbin, who is member of the caucus, Free Belarus, and there is another caucus now in House of Representatives, Friends of Belarus caucus, and whoever is from congressional delegation would like to join this caucus, we would like that so much. Thank you.
Janya, thank you so much for being here with us. And she has been, and the Belarusian community has been, at many of our meetings and rallies, and we certainly support and endorse her cause and the desire of the Belarusians to also live in a democratic, self-determined environment. And now we come to what I think is my favorite part of the program. This is where the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, which is the oldest and largest organization uniting the Ukrainian community since 1940, and the local leadership every year presents community service awards. This particular year was an extremely difficult year because there are so many deserving people who have worked tirelessly, without end, making personal and professional sacrifices in order to support our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, as well as support those that have now come here to Chicago. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Maria Korkach-Groshko for the presentation of the Community Service Awards, and she will be assisted by our President, Dan Ihor Chachur.
Thank you very much. Dear Ukrainian Ramada and esteemed guests and friends of Ukraine, every year, this annual event, the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America gives a community award to individuals who have dedicated their time and effort on different levels and to different needs of the Ukrainian community of Chicago. Individuals who have demonstrated such interests that are important to the community this year are three members of our community. The first is Mrs. Irina Tsenhevich. The second is Mrs. Alla Ellen Lopatkina. And third is Mr. Ihor Terletsky. I will ask Pani Ira to make her way in this direction. She was born in Lviv, Ukraine, received her degree from the Pedagogical Institute in Rohovich, Ukraine, immigrated to the U.S. in 1996, receiving the award for her involvement in the Ukrainian community of Palatine and Chicago for her numerous contributions throughout the years and ongoing. Director of the School of Ukrainian Studies in Palatine, member of the Ukrainian American Youth Association Petrovitowsky branch, member of the Women's Association for the Defense of Four Freedoms of Ukraine, Olena Pchilka branch, freelance journalist for 2 Ukrainian newspapers, one of the initiators and organizers of the Chervona Ruta Festival in Palatine, and actively involved in charitable projects to support Ukraine and its people during the war on Ukraine. I introduce to you Pani Irina Tsenhevich.
Father Yaroslav is standing. That's a big honor. I promised myself I'm not going to cry, and I will be short, but I don't know if I can keep this promise. Dear honored guests, thank you very much. This award represents enormous work of the Ukrainian community in Palatine. Here they are, my friends, my best friends, which over the last year helped our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, as well as refugees who have moved to our community. I thank the Ukrainian Congress Committee in America, in Illinois, for recognizing our efforts. This is a truly big honor to me personally and all other volunteers. I'm also grateful to my family who always believes and supports all my projects, almost all. Some projects go crazy. We pray that 2023 will be the year of the big victory. And thank you to everyone in this hall for your support of Ukraine and its fight for freedom and independence. But most of all, we are forever grateful to all volunteers and defenders on the front who risk their lives every day. Слава нашим героям! Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава Америці! Дуже дякую.
Our second awardee recipient was born and raised in Ukraine, is resident in the United States for more than 20 decades, studied at the Pre-Carpathian National University, where a bachelor degree in economics, as well as an associate degree in accounting and audit was bestowed. Facilitator of shipping more than 600 tons of humanitarian aid and medical supplies to Ukraine, in addition to 29 ambulances and 1 fire engine, only to mention a few. President of Nortia Logistics, a hauler of freight largely by her own fleet of trucks. President of the Ukrainian Resistance Foundation. We introduce to you Pani Alla Ellen Lopatkina.
On my way here, I texted a friend and said I'm horribly, terrifyingly afraid of publicly speaking today, which normally isn't an issue for me. I talk a lot. And he said, just imagine that you're talking to a close friend, just one. And I realized that this room is actually, in fact, full of friends, because otherwise you wouldn't. Incredibly humbled by receiving this award. I've been chosen among hundreds of volunteers, and I am proud to stand and receive this award with outstanding people like Roberta Poletsky and Evanescence Leverage. And I know that there's hundreds more in our community, communities across the world, and communities in this country that are so worthy of awards like this. I accept it on behalf of my team, on behalf of every volunteer that has contributed. I want to thank Ukrainian Congressional Committee of America for always being at the front line of ensuring that Ukraine has a voice in this multicultural universe of the United States, that we're heard, that we're listened to. I thank you for being a beacon in the darkest days when you led the way and you showed how to organize and you showed how to cooperate and collaborate together to help our own country. I want to thank my family for patience and sacrifices that they've made. I apologize for my absences, and that's one of the sacrifices that we all made when we were started. On February 24th, terrorist Russia attacked peaceful, still sleeping cities of a beautiful independent nation of Ukraine. That day changed our lives. It changed our priorities. It reset our values. And it also showed us the highest and the most sacrificing price that a nation can pay for freedom, for ability to choose its own destiny, for ability to decide who they will become in years and ages. I want to once again thank you, CCA, for being a beacon that steered the volunteer movement the right way and helped us all see the common goal and work on achieving it. I hope this year will be a victorious year for us, and we'll all be able to go home and see the beautiful cities being restored, and then when the lights restart again. And I hope we all get to see the peace, get to experience it, and get to invite all our honored guests to Ukraine who hasn't been there yet, to see what a beautiful country we stand for. Thank you for being friends of Ukraine. Thank you for being friends personally. Thank you for being here and supporting and sharing.
Born in Kazakhstan and at the age of 7, the family moved to Ukraine, immigrated to the United States in 2001. 5 years later, established Patriot Transport Incorporated, freight transportation and logistics solutions company, together with owners of multiple businesses, co-founder of Health Heroes of Ukraine, Inc., not-for-profit, charity organization established after the invasion of Ukraine by Russian military forces on the 24th of February 2022. The organization provides support to civilian and military forces of Ukraine. Please meet Mr. Ihor Terletsky.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so proud and honored to be here and receive this award as President of Health Heroes of Ukraine. Honestly, this is an award for everyone in this room, for all our Ukrainian American communities, City of Chicago, the United States, Canada, and other nations who help us. Together we are making the history. Together we are heading to the victory. Slava Ukraini!
Of America, Illinois Division, with all of our member organizations, members of our Ukrainian Hromada in Chicago and suburbs in the state of Illinois. We are most grateful for the support and generous donation of time, effort, and resources to Pani Ihor Terletsky, Pani Alla Lopatkina, and Pani Ira Tsenhlevich. Our applause and Slava Ukraini! Strength and good health to continue in the work that they have begun until Ukraine is free.
One thing that I was struck about with these three particular awardees is how modest and how humble they are. You know, they're so humble in being recognized for what they have done. Thousands and thousands of hours have been spent to support our community here in Chicago, and millions of dollars of assistance has been gathered to support our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. And these three individuals and all the people who work with all of these individuals, we ask God's blessing for they may be able to continue as long as they can. Thank you again one more time. And now I call upon the Vice President of the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, Illinois Division, Marta Farion, to introduce Colonel Alexander Vindman formally.
Thank you, Pavlo. It is incredibly humbling to be here at the podium in the company of such heroes and such leaders. Let me just take a moment to say that I am wearing an embroidery that has a symbolic design of the Tree of Life, which has been the symbol of Ukraine's culture, identity, and language for 1,000 years. And it will continue to be that simple at a time when the evil from the east in the Kremlin is trying to destroy Ukrainian identity. We are united, and God has blessed the Ukrainian nation for 1,000 years, and it will continue to bless the Ukrainian nation for the next 1,000 years as we are completely united, not only this generation, but my children's generation, their children's generation, and every generation of Ukrainians will never forget and never forgive the evil that has been done to Ukraine. So we are united forever. It is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker, a very special individual with an extraordinary life trajectory. He is a fellow Ukrainian and a fellow immigrant, born in Kyiv, and at the age of 3, his mother passed away, and he was brought up by his grandmother and father. They immigrated as a family to the United States to New York. After graduating from State University of New York, he later graduated from Harvard University in the area of Russian, Eastern European, and Central Asian studies. He joined the US military and served in South Korea and Germany in the infantry, and then served in the Iraq War. During that war in Iraq, he sustained an injury from a roadside bomb for which he received a Purple Heart. He was promoted to the rank of Major in 2008 and Lieutenant Colonel in September of 2015. Beginning in 2008, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman became a Foreign Area Officer specializing in Eurasia. In this capacity, he served in the U.S. embassies in Kyiv and Moscow. Returning to Washington, he then became a political military affairs officer focused on Russia for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he served at the Pentagon and at the National Security Council. In November 2020, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman retired from the military and joined the staff of the national security blog Lawfare with a fellowship at the Pritzker Military Foundation that has a headquarters here in Chicago. He is pursuing his PhD at Johns Hopkins University and has lectured at major universities and institutions and leads a consulting group on military and policy issues. He has been closely involved in issues promoting support of Ukraine during this entire year of war, and he has visited Ukraine personally several times this year during the war. That is quite a career for an immigrant. Being an immigrant whose family came to the United States seeking freedom and the values that democracy stands for. He stood up for those values when it took a lot of courage to do so. So I was honored to have met him almost 2 years ago, and I've followed his career and public statements ever since, and I am truly inspired by him. So it is my honor to introduce Lieutenant Colonel retired Alexander Vindman.
Добрий день.
Дякую за можливість розмовляти з вами. Я дуже рідко користуюся українською мовою, буду по-англійськи. So first of all, thank you for welcoming a native son of Ukraine to address this group on this anniversary of one of the most recent drives for independence for Ukraine. I think I'm going to probably be a little bit different. There have been some terrific speakers here. There have been some terrific speakers with rousing remarks. I'm going to focus on my area of expertise, which is geopolitics, defense, national security issues, and maybe spend a little bit of time talking about how we got to this war, what lessons we should draw, how this war is going to develop, and ultimately how Ukraine will end up victorious in this campaign. So in the introduction, I think you probably get a sense for my deep study of this region. I just finished up my PhD work at Johns Hopkins on the topic of U.S. policy towards Russia and Ukraine since 1991. What I discovered is that this nation in the heart of Europe, the largest country in Europe, has been undertaking a struggle for independence for centuries. Certainly in earnest, since the 17th century, Ukraine's been striving for independence, and unfortunately it was in a very tough neighborhood. Russia, the Polish kingdom, the Ottoman Empire, all were vying for control over this prize, this breadbasket, the hardy population. And Russia, for a short period of time, amounting to some 100, 150, couple hundred years, depending on how you count it, managed to gain dominance over the territory of Ukraine. But it was always going to be a temporary situation because the Ukrainian people in this centuries-long struggle were constantly asserting their right to independence, making strides to sharpen their view of what it is to be a nation, what it is to be Ukrainian. And that first effort culminated in 1919 with a brief stint, unfortunately, several years as an independent country to be very quickly subsumed. And even then, when Russia took control, it wasn't all that the entirety of Ukraine as we know it today, the internationally recognized boundaries. It was central, eastern, and southern Ukraine. Russia didn't get control of western Ukraine until right around World War II, which planted the seeds for what we witnessed as a strong independence drive in 1991. So I'll pick up the story here in somewhat more detail. In 1991, Ukraine declared its independence. This was only a partial independence, a partial breakaway from Russia. For their next decade, next 15 years or so, Russia had a huge amount of influence over Ukraine, mainly because for this entire Soviet period, for portions of the Imperial Russian period, Russia had built a kind of system where every peripheral state would feed the Kremlin, would feed the core of the country. And it was a very, very difficult project to break away from those centuries of Russian domination and control. But slowly and surely, the Ukrainian people began to recognize their own unique independence, in large part with the aid of the international community, with the diaspora that provided resources, provided a drive to help Ukraine realize its desires for sovereignty and independence. And by the time you get to 2004, you have an orange revolution that is a fulsome rejection of Russian dominance. That period was a period of missed opportunities for, frankly, the Western world. If the US and the West had high hopes for the region, for Eurasia, for Russia in the 90s, there may have been some merit for that, especially after the high costs of the Cold War. But by the time you get to 2004, you also have years of Putin and the Putin regime taking undemocratic and then anti-democratic positions, both internally and externally. So by the time you get to the end of 2004, 2005, the Orange Revolution, this was an opportunity for the US to cast off its fair weather friendship with Ukraine. Only really interested in Ukraine throughout the 90s because of denuclearization, some kind of amorphous view of Ukraine as a Western liberal democratic state, but with really, frankly, without the resources necessary to realize that vision. And 2005 was an opportunity to both recognize where Russia was headed and the opportunities realized with regards to, and opportunities available to Ukraine. It was a missed opportunity. By 2008, this Putinist regime doubled down on aggression and pivoted to military aggression to reassert its dwindling control over the near abroad. And that was another opportunity for the US to put resources and support Ukraine, support a sovereign, independent Ukraine, while it was still under the westernizing presidency of Viktor Yushchenko. Missed opportunity again. This is a recurring theme in the past, over the past certainly several decades. By the time you get to 2014, there was another opportunity to recognize that Russia was an aggressor state and put resources towards Ukraine, arm Ukraine with the kinds of munitions, the kinds of weapon systems, arm Ukraine with the economic resources to be able to westernize and modernize, to secure its sovereignty. We passed up that opportunity. We passed up that opportunity in spite of Russian aggression, in spite of the fact that Russia was using chemical weapons against its adversaries, its opponents, engaging in assassinations, engaging in efforts to overturn elections. And we wound out in 2012 with a country led by a president that had every reason to believe that he could get away with naked aggression against Ukraine. Why not? For the preceding 20 years, we looked the other way. The Western world looked the other way while Putin continued to increase his aggression and his aspirations for the region. A series of missed opportunities. I think we are now in 2022 at a moment where it's clear that this policy was broken and it needs to be cast aside. And what you're seeing in both the capitals in Brussels, in the EU, in Berlin, and in Washington is a struggle to break from this past. To break from a policy of wishful thinking, foreign policy based on aspirations or fears, something that Putin was very effective at preying on. The aspirations for a cooperative relationship with Russia that was never going to be realized except in some small ways, or fears of a Cold War. But in fact, by looking the other way, by failing to show some fortitude and think long-term, we realized that the one thing that we wanted to avoid, which is another Cold War. We're locked in this Cold War. So that's how we get to today. What is the next year look like? It's going to be a very difficult year. Ukraine has been heroic in its defense of the soldiers have been heroic in the defense of their homes, their nation, their aspirations for a prosperous Western future. But that's simply not going to be enough without Western support. Ukraine withstood the onslaught of the second largest military in the world. Unlike many, it was clear to some that closely studied Russia and Ukraine that Ukraine was going to be there. And we had an opportunity in the months before this war, in the first months after the war, to provide Ukraine with all the support that it needed to be successful, to be victorious. Ukraine did most of that on its own. Not until the summer did Ukraine start to receive the kinds of equipment, the kinds of support it really needs to be victorious and liberate its territory. We are slowly moving in the direction of equipping Ukraine with every bit of resource it needs to be victorious. We're not there yet. Lots of equipment's coming in, but we're not there yet. We have not made the mental switch to ensure a Ukrainian victory and a Russian defeat. And what is a Ukrainian victory? It's not just a Ukrainian victory that locks in the final battle for Ukraine's independence. It's also a battle for European stability and the battle for the soul of the 21st century as a democratic 21st century, not governed by the rules of the jungle and countries like Russia, China, Iran, but by the rules-based international order that frankly has allowed the United States to prosper. I think this next year is going to be challenging. It's likely that Russia is going to mobilize hundreds of thousands more troops. They did it once, they managed to mobilize somewhere in the ballpark of 300,000 troops. They might try that again. That doesn't mean success. Russia thinks that sheer numbers, who could care less about those souls, those human lives? But he does believe that those numbers might be sufficient to win the war, to not just seize those 4 areas that he's annexed, but all of Ukraine. That's his aspiration. He's not going to be successful because in the same breath, the Ukrainians every day are getting stronger. They're getting new equipment, they're getting better training, and they're getting slowly but surely convincing the rest of the democratic world that Ukraine could win. So these next several months are going to be Russia mobilizing forces, Ukraine weathering the storm of large-scale offensives, and then by the time we get to the spring and summer, after the Russians have broken their ability to conduct offensive operations, you'll have Ukraine back on the march, liberating territory. But this is a recipe for a long war. If we had, at any point in our past history, over the past 20 years, provided Ukraine with additional support, this war could have been averted, or it could have been a short war. Even in the opening months of this war, if Ukraine received the kinds of equipment it's getting now, this war could have been winding down. Putin would have never had a theory for victory. He wouldn't have continued this fight. He would have gone home to preserve his regime. He's going to get this message by the end of the year, but it's going to be a dangerous year. And frankly, uncomfortable for anybody that studies geopolitics and understands the risks involved, and that there's a small possibility that Ukraine could lose and Russia could win. That would be a disaster, not just for the Ukrainian people, but for the American people. So we all need to double down our efforts. It's been a long year already. I think a lot of us have poured enormous energies, enormous resources to help Ukraine win. It's going to be even more critical over the next 6 months, over the next year. I think what I would counsel this group to do is to re-engage with your communities, re-engage with your leadership, re-engage with the other associations, Ukraine associations and committees, and make sure that your representatives here and your brother and sister organizations in both the Ukrainian, the Baltic, the Eastern European, the Polish community are activated and energized to provide Ukraine every bit of support they need to win. That's the way we secure a prosperous American future. So I've spent basically this entire year, in addition to finishing up my doctorate, I was successful in concluding my work, trying to do everything I could to help Ukraine. Ukraine could still use quite a bit of help. And I have every confidence that Ukraine will be successful. One personal note, I guess, as I conclude, when my family came to the United States, I'm an immigrant, a refugee from the Soviet Union. When we came to the United States, we were raised on this Russian propaganda that we were Russian Jews, not Ukrainian Jews, because the Russians effectively propagandized the Jewish diaspora, the folks that fled from the Soviet Union, that it was Ukraine that was the enemy of the Jewish people. That's not true. That is false. The Russians have always played the unseen hand in a lot of these activities and pogroms against the Jewish population. And as I studied the history and understood the complexities, there are a lot of different, and in generations long past, not current generations, but in generations long past, there's a lot of blame to go around. But what I can tell you is I take a deep sense of pride in the fact that I'm a Ukrainian American and proud to have rediscovered my Ukrainian roots and proud to be able to come here before you as a Ukrainian American and say thank you.
you so much, Colonel Vindman. It was very enlightening to hear your presentation from a military, geopolitical, analytical perspective. And as you had so effectively underscored, there have been many opportunities that were missed for Ukraine to recognize and achieve its potential. Well, we're at a different crossroads now. And we also realize that what you said regarding the notorious propaganda that had been coming out of the Kremlin for decades and decades is finally being exposed for the lies, falsehoods, and untruths that they truly are. So we appreciate everything you've done on that end, Colonel, and I can assure you, when we met with Secretary Blinken 2 days ago in this building, we asked for the maximum. As a leader in the United States Armed Forces, you game plan all eventualities. And the eventuality that we underscored is based in historic truths. We pointed out that after World War II, the United States of America and our allies demilitarized Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. And we had a period of relative peace in Europe for nearly 80 years that was interrupted by Putin and the Russian invasion. So we suggested to the Secretary, when this war is over and Ukraine is victorious, we and our allies need to ensure that Russia is demilitarized, denuclearized, and guarantee us a long era of peace and prosperity on this earth. So thank you. And now it's my honor to introduce Janusz Bugajski. He's a senior fellow at the Jamestown Foundation, has authored 22 books on Europe, Russia, and transatlantic relations, including his most recent titled, Failed State, A Guide to Russia's Rupture. I hope it predicts a quick end to that. In addition, he is host of the new Bugajski Hour TV show broadcast in the Balkans and is a columnist for media outlets in the US, the UK, Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Georgia, and Ukraine. I have appreciated hearing Mr. Bugajski's presentation many times at different conferences organized by our dear mutual friend, Professor Walter Zaritsky. We have also listened to Mr. Bugajski just recently when he gave a presentation during the briefing for the UCCA National Advocacy Days in Washington, D.C. So I've always enjoyed his presentation. I'm sure you will as well. A warm welcome to our friend Janusz Bugajski.
I suppose the good thing about going last is nobody can contradict you, so let me put my glasses on. My presentation is going to be a little bit longer, if you don't mind staying, because I want to get into a little bit more substance. Can you hear me? Yep. I want to get into a little bit more substance about the future. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Ukrainian Congress Committee for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak at Ukrainian events, a pleasure and an honor. And Ukraine, to me, it has both personal and professional meaning. Let me just say that, first of all, my mother's family, I come from a Polish family, but my mother's family is from Western Ukraine. She was born in Rivne, and my grandfather was born in Lviv. My family was deported to the Arctic and Siberia, with over 1 million other Poles and thousands of Ukrainians after the Soviet invasion in September '39, but they survived, and that's why I'm here. Professionally, I've been working in Washington for over 30 years on Ukrainian issues after Ukraine regained its independence, including running an advisory committee at the Center for Strategic and International Studies with Zbigniew Brzezinski in the 90s to help put Ukraine on the map in Washington. It's incredible how much ignorance there was. As has been said, this was perceived as being a part of Russia rather than a distinct, unique country. So I think we did help, at least at that time, to help to move the country closer to Western institutions and establish firmer relations with the United States. But it was an uphill struggle, and of course that continued. Now, Ukraine again finds itself in an existential struggle for national independence and national survival after Moscow unleashed a war to eradicate the Ukrainian state and the Ukrainian nation. Let's not beat around the bush. That was the purpose. It's not a question just of territory, it's not a question just of resources, it's a question of eradication of your identity. But despite Kremlin ambitions, I am convinced that Ukraine will prevail in a struggle that can only have one winner. There can't be a compromise here. You either exist or you don't exist. You either beat Ukraine or you defeat yourself. And I'll outline for you 7 points why I think the war will strengthen Ukraine, fatally damage Russia, and transform international security. Point 1. The war has had the reverse effect that Moscow intended. It has bolstered Ukrainian solidarity, strengthened Ukrainian identity, highlighted Ukraine's rich history, and comprehensively alienated Ukrainians from Russians. It has also boosted domestic trust in Ukrainian leaders. It has consolidated Ukrainian institutions and has further mobilized civil society in defense of Ukrainian democracy and Ukrainian independence. Moreover, the war has firmly placed Ukraine on the global map as an unflinching defender of human life, democracy, freedom, and independent statehood. That's point 1. Second point, the war has bolstered the Ukrainian military. From a relatively small and inadequately armed force, as I remember it, particularly in the 90s, heavily corrupted, subverted by Russia, Ukraine has now developed one of the most effective militaries that is adaptive, determined, and increasingly well-armed and well-organized. This is in stark contrast, I would say, to Russia's corrupt, inefficient, and brutalized military. Ukraine will prevail in this war as long as it continues to receive the necessary military assistance, especially long-range missiles, modern tanks, sophisticated air defense systems, and even modern fighter aircraft. And I'm convinced, as others have said, that it will. Of course, the West should have been proactive a year ago in providing Ukraine with the kind of weapons it needed, and this would have saved countless lives. I remember not just myself, but many people in Washington saying, arm Ukraine to the teeth, deter this kind of an attack. Otherwise, you're going to, weakness is an invitation to Russia to attack. Above all, I would say that Ukraine, if Ukraine had been a NATO member, which as we know, many countries resisted within NATO, unfortunately, Russia would not have attacked and risked a direct war with the United States. That is, to me, absolutely clear. It's all the more reason why Ukraine needs to be a NATO member in the future, because that, together with Russian demilitarization, will protect against future attacks. Now, as Ukraine continues its counter-offensive, only the Ukrainian General Staff knows which territories will be liberated and when. We don't do second-guessing like a lot of military analysts do. It's going to be a tough winter, but it'll be tougher for Russia. Given its supply problems, its poorly trained troops, its lack of officer corps, and its low morale. They're even importing ammunition from North Korea and Iran. What does that tell you about their own stocks? That's a side thing. In contrast, the Ukrainian military, despite large losses, is highly motivated and determined and has replenished its ranks with better trained troops. The Soviet winter may have defeated the Germans during World War II, but I think the Ukrainian winter will help defeat the Muscovites. The notion that Russia can field an army of 2 million, as we keep hearing from the Kremlin in Russian television, is a delusion. It has struggled to equip a force that does not exceed 250,000. It has no NCO corps or cadre to properly train a mass army. And its manpower is not unlimited, as hundreds of thousands of citizens of military age have fled to escape conscription. If Moscow does pursue mass mobilization, it will further deplete the economy and will generate widespread opposition with no victory on the horizon. Third point, the war has strengthened NATO solidarity, especially among the frontline states that are helping Ukraine towards victory. A significant part of national defense budgets in Central Eastern Europe have now been devoted to helping Ukraine with weapons, ammunition, essential logistics, as well as all the humanitarian aid. And we saw with the recent tranche of assistance announced just this Friday that this is going to continue. The war has brought two new and military significant countries into the alliance, Finland and Sweden. The Finns know Russia probably better than anybody, and convinced NATO to bolster its military presence along the eastern flank. The war has helped increase the defense budgets of nearby NATO states, particularly Poland, the Baltic states, and Romania. Poland, in particular, I believe, will replace Germany as NATO's and America's security anchor in continental Europe. Above all, the war will strengthen Ukraine's credentials as a future NATO member, given its military fortitude and structural reforms. It will possess the only military in the world that has actually defeated Russia in the modern era. You think about that. My fourth point. The war has exposed Russia as an anachronistic imperial and colonial state. Much of Ukraine's history and identity have been distorted or appropriated by Moscow, while Ukraine's revival has exposed the fragile foundations of the Russian state. And I believe this war is a desperate attempt to salvage the Muscovites' own brittle history and confused multi-ethnic and imperial identity. Without Ukraine, Russia's claims to empire shrink, and they hasten the collapse of the colonial state. The war is intensifying Russia's internal problems. Hyper-centralization has exposed the country's multiple weaknesses, including a contracting economy that is increasingly squeezed by international sanctions, military defeats in Ukraine that revealed the incompetence and corruption of Russia's ruling elite, and disquiet in numerous regions, this has to be very carefully watched, over their shrinking budgets as a result of the war and as a result of economic sanctions. Moscow is being exposed as a rapacious imperial power that is exhausting its capacities to hold the country together. It will experience elite power struggles and intensifying rivalries between the central government and disaffected regions, as well as factions within the security services and military, which we're already seeing. In some parts of the country, it could lead to civil wars and border disputes, but it will also embolden the emergence of new states and inter-regional federations that control their own resources and no longer send their men to die for Moscow's empire. Fifth point. This brings me to my book. The war has underscored the imperative of decolonization and de-Russification to reverse centuries of state oppression and assimilation of indigenous nations within the various Russian empires, or Muscovite empires I prefer to call them, Tsarist, Soviet, Putinist. The war is accelerating Russia's imperial collapse. The invasion of Ukraine demonstrates that the Kremlin does not respect the international borders of neighboring states. However, this imperial policy will rebound on Russia as the country's external and internal borders become increasingly disputed by its numerous republics, regions, and neighbors. In fact, my new book, released, actually I wrote it before the war began, but I think the attack on Ukraine has accelerated all the processes I talk about in the book. It's entitled Failed State, A Guide to Russia's Rupture. We ran out of copies, I brought two. I give two out, but we've ordered a new batch to be printed. And also it's going to be printed in Kyiv. There's a Ukrainian version, Ukrainian translation coming out at the end of this month, and I'm hoping to go to launch the book there. And as I said, it's called Failed State, A Guide to Russia's Rupture, and it contends, my book contends that the Russian Federation has been unable, it's been unsuccessful in transforming itself either into a nation state, a civic state, or even a stable imperial state. In recognition of the book, I was honored to be placed on the Kremlin sanctions list. For US Not just that, but I continue to be subject to persistent accusations by the Russian state media, and I'm collecting all the snippets, that I am the mastermind issuing instructions for the breakup of Russia. I'm not kidding. I only wish, right? My sixth point. The war has placed Ukraine at the forefront of supporting indigenous nations in the Russian Federation. Don't look at Russia and simply say the Muscovites. There are many people in Russia, given the right conditions, will also want their freedom. And here I think Ukraine can play a major role, and is already playing such a role, in Russia's rupture, by recognizing the right to independence of numerous republics inside Russia. We've already had this with the Verkhovna Rada talking about Chechnya as only being temporarily occupied. Circassia, Ingushetia, Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Dagestan, Tuva, Saka, Karelia, Kalmykia, Buryata, the list goes on. Even the Cossack coasts, Don, Terek and others. Remember Kosakia, remember the movements for independence? When Ukraine reached for independence in 1919, there were also independence in other parts of the Russian Empire by Cossack populations. And don't forget also the large number of Ukrainians inside the Russian Federation who have resisted Russification or are now and will rediscover their Ukrainian heritage. This includes neighboring Kuban, as well as several so-called Ukrainian wedges, kliny, in far-flung regions, including in southern Siberia and the Far East. Don't forget your brethren in these countries. These are all part of, at the moment, the Russian Federation. At some point, they too would want their self-determination, their sovereignty, their autonomy. My seventh point is more global, more geostrategic. I believe that Ukraine's victory in this war will propel a revolution in global security and the collapse of the Russian Federation, for which unfortunately our policymakers are unprepared. Instead of planning contingencies for external spillovers and capitalizing on Russia's de-imperialization, Western officials, too many of them, appear to be stuck in a bygone era to keep the country intact. Most Western leaders still believe they can return to the post-Cold War status quo and fail to see the benefits of Russia's disintegration. I had an article in Politico Europe last week precisely on this subject, the benefits of Russia's disintegration. Those interested, I'm sure Dan will have access. Let me list a few of the benefits. I have a huge list, but let me just pick out a few. As Moscow turns inward, its capacity for foreign aggression diminishes, as will its ability to promote Europe's energy dependence and engage in political corruption. Already Europe is weaning itself off Russian energy. A huge mistake, a huge geostrategic blunder that the European Union, led by Germany, committed over the past 10 to 15 years. NATO's eastern flank from the Arctic to the Black Sea will become more secure, and it will enhance economic development and regional cooperation. Ukraine as well as Moldova, will be able to regain their occupied territories and petition for EU and NATO integration without fear of Russia's reaction. Belarus will be able to regain its independence, build a democracy finally, and develop productive relations with its neighbors. I have a whole list on the South Caucasus, Central Asia, other parts of neighboring regions that will directly benefit from Russia's disintegration. Let me make one more point here. The idea, and I keep hearing this, that Western leaders somehow help Putin by talking about Russia's collapse is completely misleading. In reality, it is silence, denials, and a lack of a future-oriented policy that actually helps Moscow. The Kremlin claims that the West wants to destroy Russia regardless of actual US and EU policy. Denials from Washington and Brussels simply fuel Kremlin conspiracy theories, similarly to the narratives about the alleged NATO threat. We've been telling Russia that NATO is not a threat for how many years? And I keep laughing at officials. They need it as a threat. You're not going to convince them it's not a threat. They need that threat. NATO is the threat to the Russian threat. That's what it amounts to. I would say a much more effective approach would be to clearly specify what the West supports in Russia. Open backing for pluralism, democracy, federalism, civil rights, and the autonomy of republics and regions can help embolden Russia's citizens by demonstrating that they are not globally isolated, which is something the Putin regime has wanted to do. They also need more information that Moscow suppresses, especially its failure to provide security and economic development, as well as the positives of breaking free of Moscow, the advantages of forming new states that cultivate peaceful and productive relations with neighbors. We did this, remember, during the existence of the Soviet bloc and the Soviet Union, supporting democracy, supporting pluralism, national independence, human rights. We had radio stations that were broadcasting that people were listening to. We seem to have forgotten how successful we were. Let me conclude then by saying that, again, Western officials, too many of them, still exhibit, not some in Central Europe, I'm talking about particularly Western Europe and some in America. Western officials still exhibit wishful thinking that beneficial relations can be established with a post-Putin Kremlin, or that Russian liberals can democratize the empire. I think that is wishful thinking. Western leaders, remember, made a grave mistake when they assumed that the collapse of Soviet communism ensured the end of Russian imperialism. And Ukraine is now paying the price for that mistake. Policymakers must avoid a second grave mistake by presuming that the current empire is permanent. Imperial states invariably collapse when they overreach, as Moscow has in Ukraine, because Kiev will restore its Ukraine's international borders and will unify all of its territories. And that's a good theme to wish you on a successful, productive, and very important National Unity Day. Ще не вмерла Україна. Слава Україні!
Mr. Bugajski, you did not disappoint. And as we bring our program to a close, again, I want to thank all of our speakers, our guest speakers, our elected officials, our ethnic community representatives, the recipients of the awards that are here with us today. And I want to thank every single one of you, patriotic Ukrainians and friends of the Ukrainian community, taking your time to be here with us today in our annual celebration of Ukrainian Unity Day. I have just one small housekeeping matter to bring up with you, and that is a reminder that the annual Ukrainian National Fund drive has started, and our chair of the UNF, Василь Третьяк, will be happy to collect your donations. Шановні пані і панове, ще від 50-х років на проголошення Конгрес українців в Канаді було прийнято рішення, що це є обов'язок кожного патріотичного українця, який знаходиться на території Америки, вирівняти ваші щорічний вклад в Українського національного фонду. Член управи Василь Третьяк буде там при вході, підходіть до нього, або вирівняйте сьогодні, або домовтеся з ним, як ви можете виповнити ваш обов'язок. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for being here. Please stand as we close the march of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Гімн Збройних сил України. Ladies and gentlemen, until we meet again, stay safe. Slava Ukraini!